Thailand.
My name is Michael Muhammad Knight. I'm the author of The Five Percenters, Islam, Hip Hop, and the Gods of New York. Well, the Five Percenters came out of the Nation of Islam, which is itself is an indigenous American movement and very much removed from what a lot of people would call Orthodox Islam. So as far as the nation is from Sunni Islam, the Five Percenters are even farther from that. And the founder of the movement, who I call Allah because that was his name, Allah specifically said that he was not a Muslim. The 5% rejects the idea of a transcendent, abstract, spiritual God who's the creator of the universe. The traditional Abrahamic, Judeo-Christian, Islamic God that does not exist in the 5%. There's a lot of room for negotiation, actually, because there are Sufis who've been accused of saying the same thing throughout history. So, whether they did or not, or whether that's a misreading, I've seen some 5%ers actually that I would say, well, they technically don't believe in the mystery God. And I've seen medieval Sufi writings where I would say, well, these guys technically do believe in the mystery God. So it's complicated. But the way that I see the 5%, the way that I was actually taught within the culture is, whatever religious tradition you engage, whether that's Islam or Christianity or Buddhism, you can go into any temple, any mosque, whatever they're talking about, that's you. So if you're in a Buddhist temple, you are Buddha. And that's what it means to be 5%. Once you start looking for answers outside yourself, oh, please, ghost in the sky, old man in a beard with a beard sitting on top of a cloud, please help me win the lottery, that kind of thing. Like that's when you've departed from the 5%. So the first time that I heard of the 5%ers was in Pakistan, in a madrasa. I was a teenager, and one of my mentors was telling me about this sect that he had worked with in prison in the United States. And this apparently, very esoteric, very militant, bizarre sect, in which boys were gods and girls were earths, and they were all teenagers delving into this, secret knowledge of numbers and astronomical data and things like that. And even though I was extremely Orthodox Sunni Muslim at the time, I was enthralled. I thought that was fascinating. But that was the end of the conversation. And it wasn't for years and years later that my perspectives on religion had changed, and I started to look at those types of movements with a more open mind. So one summer I was corresponding with a god, and I asked him, if I'm white and I'm the devil, is there anything I can gain from this? Is there any way that I could grow from this knowledge? And he told me to seek out Azrael. Azrael was, the white 5%er from the 60s. And he said, go to Harlem, go to the school, find Azrael, and, see what happens. So, I went to the Show and Prove, which was like the big annual convention. And I asked for Azrael. They led me to him, and we spent the weekend together. And, going into it, I expected it, just on reputation, to be extremely hostile, extremely aggressive, racially antagonistic. And I really didn't know if I was even going to get out okay, showing up there as a devil. But the kindness and friendship and hospitality that I was greeted with, really opened my eyes to the fact that this culture has been misunderstood. And if it was misunderstood in that way, how many other ways, was I given the wrong picture? So I just kept wanting to go back and back and uncover more of this history and this tradition. And over time, it just became clear to me that, this culture did have things to say to me as a white person, as an American, as a Muslim, dealing with a religious tradition. And I actually began to personally grow through my investigation of the 5%. So My understanding of the early history of the 5% is that Allah was basically teaching a standard Nation of Islam view on race, in which white people were devils, case closed, no room for discussion. And when he went to Mattawan State Hospital for the criminally insane, he actually encountered a white youth who was being tortured by the guards, beaten mercilessly, subjected to the abuses of other inmates. And this seems to have sparked a transformation in Allah's consciousness of race. Basically that, here's a white kid who's not really benefiting from white privilege. And he's in the devil's kingdom, but he's undergoing the same torture and the same abuse and punishment as anyone else in that place. So what it meant to be white, changed, it shifted in that environment. So Allah felt sympathy for this youth. And the story goes that when the kid was in a coma and when he recovered, Allah was the person standing over him. And Allah said, "You are a righteous man." And the kid says, "Well, you must be God." And it turned out, well, yeah, this is Allah, and my name's Allah, and I'm going to teach you the lessons in the mathematics. And he named the kid Azrael after the angel of death, and said that it was his role to get the wrongdoers, because Azrael is kind of this liminal figure. He's white, but he's at the very bottom of the social pyramid. He's not really white in the white privilege sense of being white. He's not in the ruling class, and yet he's not black. So he kind of moves across these borders. He can go into black society, white society, and he's kind of a marginal, border type of figure. And this was in the 60s, and Azrael is still very much part of the nation, part of the movement, and he loves Allah as the only father that he really had, as the primary father figure in his life. And he actually, we were on a road trip from Harlem to Milwaukee. We were living in my car, and it was this pretty wild adventure, actually. And he gave me a name. Like, he named me Azrael Wisdom, which in the mathematics, wisdom is the number 2. So for him to call me Azrael Wisdom was really bringing me into his family, more or less. And saying that what he was giving to me, and I really treasured that and placed a lot of value on that. This is very strange, and obviously most Muslims may not be okay with it. I don't think all 5%ers would be okay with it. But the 5% actually enabled me to be a Muslim when being a Muslim was very difficult. When I had intellectual challenges and disillusionments, and I really wasn't satisfied with the tradition as it was handed to me. It was really taking a 5% thought on religion that enabled me to go into the mosque and take what I saw as the best part of my tradition and leave the poor part behind. Because the 5%, like you'll hear them break down Islam as I, self, Lord, and Master. And so once I, really ingested that, once I really, really processed that for myself and realized that, religious traditions are constructed by human beings, and I'm a human being, and, ultimately it is what I make it out to be. It was very empowering. It was very empowering. I could have my tradition without putting my mind under the capture, as Allah would have said, putting my mind under the capture of an imam or a mullah or whatever. It's mine. Islam belongs to me. Today, and a lot of 5%ers have a problem with this. Today, you can get the lessons online. You can get the alphabet and the math online. And you could conceivably be a 5%er without ever physically being in the presence of one. And a lot of guys have a problem with that because that will lead to misinterpretation and misunderstanding. Traditionally, you would encounter the culture through a God. And once you realized that, if you're the original man, that, you're a God, you would go under the study and you would be taught the lessons, degree by degree, and the alphabet and the mathematics. And once you've gone through that process of studying the lessons under, a teacher, memorizing them, creating your own interpretations, then it's basically you're making your own path. You're on your own way. It's, you know, you live it out the way that you see it. There's people who want to codify it, and I think there have been attempts throughout history, starting with, I mean, the name Nation of Gods and Earths. That's part of that codification that happens. I mean, Allah himself seemed to have been very anti-institution, very anti-organization. You know, you live it out the way that you see it. And then obviously this leads to a lot of different interpretations, a lot of different readings. So, you know, there were questions of, are we Muslims, are we not Muslims? You know, what's the proper, you know, gender roles? What's, you know, what is what? And in the 80s, there was an attempt to really give structure to the 5% through renaming it the Nation of Gods and Earths, through putting out a newspaper and documents such as what we teach and what we will achieve. Those are very like structuring, a biography of Allah that specifically says he denounced Islam as a religion, you know, that kind of thing. These different narratives that help to distinguish the 5% from other traditions and really lay out what it means to be a 5%. And you'll see people, you know, do the same thing for opposite agendas. You'll see 5%ers trying to create narratives that make 5%ers into Muslims. So yeah, everyone wants their narrative to win, but it's a pretty free and open space for the most part.